What's up, everybody? This is Jonathan Haywood from Beton. I am going to be talking about concrete countertops today and most directly how to make forms off of templates that were created on site in a client's house. To make formwork, I like to rip down 3/4 inch thick melamine. That is a little bit better than the 5/8 inch thick melamine that you can find at your local box stores. If you need to find 3/4 inch thick melamine, go to a cabinet supply company locally and they'll be able to help you out there. What I do is I take my combination square and I set it to 1 3/4 inch thick, which is the thickness of the rails, and I add 3/16 for the thickness of the blade on my Festool, and then I just make my cut, and then I slide the guide back, set the clamps, and keep making cuts until I'm done. Here we've got the templates. These were made on site in a client's house, and what a template is basically is a spatial representation of what you are trying to make. So in this instance, I've got a long L-shaped piece, and then you'll see there's a little section that sticks off from there. What that is, it goes behind the sink, which is a farmhouse style sink. And then what I'm working on right now is the piece that will mate up to that. It's kind of hard to see the section that will match up to that. I use some red stucco tape in order to secure the templates in place while I'm gluing down my form rails. It doesn't really matter what type of tape you use here. Anything that will keep it from sliding around will be sufficient. So once I've got everything, I'm sure it's not going to slide around on me, I will make measurements and go to my miter station and cut my rails down to size. On the inside corner that I'm working on right now, there's a 45-degree angle, and I like to make sure that that's nice and tight, and I will often sand that down on the inside and round that over slightly so it's not a hard angle in the piece that I'm casting. So I'll go around, and typically what I do is I'll add 1 inch to each side and put together my forms in a pinwheel fashion to where one end finishes flush with the template, the opposite end overhangs by 1 inch, and then I just carry that on around so it looks a little bit like a pinwheel. If you have any questions on what that looks like more directly, I can address that. Just leave me a note in the comments section. Now I've got a 2-inch thick piece of EPS foam. That's a white open cell foam, and I've got a template that was provided by the sink manufacturer. So I spray a little bit of adhesive on the back of that, and then I glue it down to the EPS foam, and that allows me to then get my Festool and the smaller guide rail and cut out all 4 sides of that template. So this particular sink has 2 corners that have radiuses on it, and for whatever reason the video did not, it just did not capture, but I cut down 4 sides and then I use a sanding block to smooth out that radius, and you can see it there near my right hand. I use the same red tape to tape the edges to make sure that it's nice and smooth, as the concrete reads everything. So I like to make sure that that's nice and smooth. And so here I'm going to show you the radius that I sanded out by hand. You can cut pretty close to the lines and then use the radius on the template form to sand down as your guide. And if you use probably like 120 grit on that sandpaper, or on that EPS foam, it will give you a really nice round over on that radius. Here I've heated up my glue gun, and as I go along I like to make sure to do this in small sections, and as I'm going through I'm using a combination square to make sure that the formwork is 90 degrees to this surface that I'm mounting it to. And what this will help with on site is it will make sure that there's no strange gaps from top to bottom when I have seams, and it'll make it come together really tightly. Also, it's just a lot nicer to have nice 90-degree edges versus something that's just kind of out of square. For the formwork for the sink, I tried to stick that down with double-sided tape. The double-sided tape did not want to hold for some reason. I believe that the foam had some bow to it, the way that it was stored where I purchased it, and that that made it want to pull up away from the table. So what I ended up doing is I pulled it off. I removed the double-sided tape, and then I used silicone, and then I placed some weights on top of the EPS foam. Here it is. I'm removing the double-sided tape and then using some silicone to glue that thing down. Then I'll put these little concrete blocks that I have around for instances just like this to weigh that thing down so it doesn't go anywhere. When you're trowel finishing, you want to make sure that the formwork, including sink knockouts, are really well adhered to the table so that your trowel doesn't knock it out of place while you're cruising around and smoothing things out. So next up, I have a kind of a unique situation here with these countertops. They're in a very modern industrial house, and there's some conduit that runs on the interior walls that will interfere with the concrete countertops. So I make some 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch rectangles, cut them out with a handsaw and using my combination square to make sure that I'm really tight and getting straight lines. And then after everything's cut out, I'll take that sanding block that I used to make the radius on the sink knockout, and I'll smooth that over so that that one side of my void here is going to have basically a half circle, and then I'll put those in where I've got the notches in my templates. So after all of my pieces are in place, I remove my templates, and then I take a piece of 3/4 inch thick EPS foam, and I use the inside line of my template to cut out what will be a void for the field thickness of the countertop. And what I mean there is that with the type of concrete that I cast, 3/4 of an inch thick is all you need, and it's stronger than a traditional concrete that you can buy at a box store. So I only need to make it 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch thick, and so this foam allows me to create a void underneath that, the surface of the countertop. And there's a perimeter around the edges that is 2 inches so that it will look thick, but in all actuality it's only 3/4 of an inch thick. And so that's pretty much it. This is how I put my forms together for a trowel finished concrete countertop.